was underway and made clear that it was simply that, the opening stages of what will be a broad attack that will begin sometime down the road. Christiane Amanpour and Wolf Blitzer are both in Kuwait City. This will be a central and important place over the next several days.
Go ahead, Christiane.
Wolf and Aaron, let's talk a little bit about the allies of the United States, Britain and Spain. We have been told, and certainly wire reports are saying, that Prime Minister Tony Blair was awoken, or at least informed, after midnight British time, that these attacks had been brought forward. We're not sure whether this was a surprise to him or not, but what we do know is consistent with what our reporters Jamie McIntyre and others from the Pentagon had been saying. We believe that the British had not expected the full initial launch of this war to begin right after the deadline, and we are not sure when or whether we're going to hear from Tony Blair or indeed people at the British Defence Ministry. So far they have given no statement about what's going on. We understand that in Spain, the Prime Minister of Spain, Aznar, who is also an ally in this campaign, although has not committed military forces, is also going to address his people. As we know, of course, today there have been several activities out here in terms of military activities. US forces and British forces have attacked artillery batteries inside southern Iraq, those which were deemed to be threatening either to US and British forces arrayed now in the demilitarized zone there, or indeed against Kuwait itself, neighboring Kuwait. And also what we've been reporting for much of this day was that 17 Iraqi soldiers had surrendered, according to US officials, and apparently that being at least a small victory so far for the American PSYOPs operation, which has been underway for so long, and with so many millions of leaflets that have been dropped on the forces there, urging them not to fight.
And whether or not those PSYOPs, those psychological operations, the leafleting of those millions of leaflets have an impact in convincing Iraqi troops to give up, if you will, obviously remains to be seen. Now, I want to bring in CNN's Kira Phillips. She's aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. Kira, tell our viewers what you can about what you're seeing and what they're doing aboard that carrier right now.
All right, Wolf, I can barely hear you, but I'm going to try and give you as much information as possible right now. I can tell you that I can confirm that Operation Southern Watch is over. Right now, the strike fighters here on USS Abraham Lincoln and other supporting aircraft are in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Earlier, about within 45 minutes ago, we showed you F-14s, the F-14 Tomcatters launching off the carrier. Those pilots indeed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom now. This conflict with Iraq is moving quicker. The tempo is building up. Right now, you're seeing a shot of an F-18 getting ready to launch off the U.S. Abraham Lincoln here. As you can see, it's an integration of a number of squadrons. The first to go were the F-14s. Now the F-18s are starting to get into the mix. Very interesting thing I might want to point here out on the F-18. You might be able to pick it out, and that is the bunker busters. A lot of talk about the weaponry used in this conflict with Iraq. A lot of concern about collateral damage. Therefore, a lot of effort has been put into JDAM and GPUs and bunker busters. The hope is, once these strikes take place, do I still have you? Wolf, do I still have you?
Go ahead, go ahead, Kira.
You still have me. Okay, thank you. I'm hearing a little interference. There we go. I'm hearing a little interference, and I apologize for that. I want to make sure that I'm still with you here. Once again, the concentration on special weaponry, precise weaponry, so that they will hit their targets and the explosion will be in more of a contained manner versus a wider type of explosion with the risk of hurting innocent civilians. Therefore, that's why you're seeing the bunker busters, a type of weapon on the F-18 that can drop deep and explode deep within the earth. On the F-14s, the strike fighters that took off about 45 minutes ago, they've got JDAMs, GPS-guided bombs. This is a new asset to the F-14 Tomcatters here on the USS Abraham Lincoln. As you know, those bombs can drop through any type of weather, haze, dust, anything that could affect the laser bombs, the LGB laser-guided bombs. That's the other type of weapon that the F-14s have. Now, as the F-18 squadron gets ready to integrate with the strike fighters that are already out there, I can tell you within hours we can see up to more than 100 aircraft in the air, depending how the tempo progresses. I can tell you that a number of Iraqi threats, strike fighter pilots told me they've been training for, paying attention to, intelligence coming into them. Plenty of time, of course, to observe U.S. patterns. The Iraqis have had plenty of time. So the element of surprise, as you can see, we're all surprised that this happened so quickly and is happening in a manner which obviously nobody really expected. Even the squadrons here are learning by the minute how this campaign is unfolding. I can tell you Iraqi threat, SAM, surface-to-air missiles. The strike fighter pilots will be paying close attention to that. Also, old Soviet fighters, the MiG-25, a very favorite aircraft with the Iraqi regime. They've been moving a lot of things around, we are told. The Iraqis have. There's a lot of dispersal that's been taking place. So the object in this campaign, of course, is to be able to try and follow where all that movement is and be able to hit targets right on top of the targets. AAA fire, another concern for strike fighter pilots. We'll be paying attention to that once they're airborne. Now, of course, the perfect case scenario here was that Saddam Hussein would surrender. That obviously has not been the case at this point. Sorry, I'm getting information as I'm talking to you here. Are you still with me, Wolf?
I am, Kira. I just want to update our viewers. Hold on one second. You were talking about something very significant with the president formally announcing the start of what is now being called Operation Iraqi Freedom. What you note that the Southern Watch, Operation Southern Watch, Operation Northern Watch have ended. Those are the two no-fly zone operations, patrolling the no-fly zone in the south, patrolling the no-fly zone in the north. That's been going on for nearly a dozen years. The Iraqis can't launch any kind of aircraft in that southern no-fly zone or the northern no-fly zone. By and large, U.S. aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, as well as bases, the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, as well as the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, responsible for launching U.S. and British warplanes to patrol the northern and southern no-fly zones. Kira Phillips once again aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, one of 5 aircraft carriers now in the vicinity, now participation in Operation Iraqi Freedom. If you're still there, Kira, go ahead, tell us what you have.
All right, Wolf, am I back with you, Wolf?
Kira's obviously not hearing me, or we're not hearing her. We are seeing these live pictures via videophone from the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. U.S. warplanes taking off, F-14 Tomcats, F-18s, getting ready to participate in this Operation Iraqi Freedom, which is the name of the U.S. military operation, together with the British, a small Australian contingent as well. Aaron?
Thank you. It's just past midnight, 8 past midnight in the east. A new day here in the United States, a day that we expect to unfold dramatically, but precisely how is impossible now to know. We do know that Operation Iraqi Freedom is underway. We began to see that earlier this evening, 9:40 or so this evening, when Nick Robertson reported it. Nick, what is it like in Baghdad now?
Fighting day. And let's pay attention to that. Repeat. The president, the leader, the fighter, Saddam Hussein, may God protect him, and who is victorious, will shortly address with a speech, with an important speech in this fighting day, in this great day. And let us pay attention to that.
Announcing that Saddam Hussein will shortly go on TV, and these are the pictures. That is what Iraqi TV. I don't know if we can get back to that. It is in a sense a sort of remarkable scene that normal TV programming is going on in Iraq as they await the president of the country to announce that the country has been attacked by the United States. Nick Robertson, are you able to hear me now?
hear you just fine. Indeed, the broadcaster giving the message that President Saddam Hussein will speak shortly, that's been playing here a number of times this morning. For about the last 40 minutes, that same message is being played out and broadcast to Iraqis here, that their leader will broadcast a message to them soon. Just as we were talking before, the air raid siren here went off again. I saw some people hurrying to get off the streets here. There are not many people around at the moment, but that was just 15 minutes after the all clear going off, the air raid siren going off, and some people hurrying to get off the streets, Aaron. Although right now, nothing appears to be happening.
Nick, our reporting from the Pentagon, from the region, is that nothing major, the major rollout of Operation Iraqi Freedom is not going to happen yet. And earlier, General Clark, I believe it was, talked about the value of starting it at night in the darkness, and we're a long way from that. It's just early morning now in Iraq right now. Earlier, a short time ago, not very long ago, in New York, the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations talked to reporters how odd it must be to be the country's representative in the United States when the United States has just attacked your country. But this is what he had to say earlier in New York.
Do our best to contact, to tackle this matter within the United Nations and with the Security Council.
What would be the next step to do that then?
Hopefully tomorrow we will start that,
that step. Exactly what would you try and do?
Well, you know, just perhaps we have to send a letter there to the President of the Security Council and to the Secretary General. You know, this is a breach of peace. So we have to ask them to, otherwise we can do nothing new. Me, myself, I can do nothing. I have just to tell the international community that the war is started, this is against the charter, and this is the violation of international law.
Mohammed Al-Duri, there is an element to this, as there is in diplomatic matters, of almost scripting. It was clear, it's been clear for days, that as soon as the Americans began the attack, that the next day the Iraqis would go to the United Nations to protest that, to demand the Security Council take action on that. Michael Oku is one of our team of correspondents who covers the United Nations. He's been there a lot over the last month or so. Michael, just run down the process that you expect to unfold over on the east side of New York in the next 24 hours.
Well, Aaron, what we expect is that the Iraqi ambassador who you just heard from will be very vocal about going to other Security Council nations and asking them to convene to talk about the action that the U.S. is obviously involved in at this moment. And the word we are getting is that it will really be more of a speech-a-thon of sorts, that essentially these ambassadors will come forward, that they will, in their own words, condemn the U.S. and UK action here. We don't expect there to be any kind of a resolution or even a presidential statement, which is what often happens in situations like this. The advice that the Iraqi ambassador is getting, according to some diplomats we have spoken to, is that it is not a good idea right now to try to go too forward on this, to try to isolate the United States in any way, but to just come forward and to make their voices heard. Aaron?
And just finish the thought, Michael. The reason that he is being given that advice is that there is not that much support for the Iraqi position?
Well, that's exactly right. There are quite a few diplomats here who will tell you that they do not believe in the U.S. action here, but they certainly do believe that Saddam Hussein may have weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam Hussein may certainly pose a real threat in the area. But it's really a matter, Aaron, of some diplomats believing that Mr. Hussein is dangerous, but the United States actions are not necessarily justified. And it's really sort of trying to stay in the middle on this. Aaron?
It was interesting, Michael, you said at the beginning that we expect to hear a lot of speech making at the United Nations. I think there are a whole lot of people who would say that's all we've heard from the United Nations over the last several months, and perhaps the president might agree with that. There's been a lot of speech making. When do they convene today?
They convened earlier today. Of course, this was a meeting that was called for by France, Russia, and Germany. Those three countries represented by their foreign ministers who came forward and very vocally opposed the U.S. actions here. The German ambassador saying that this is certainly not a time to engage in war, continuing to say that the inspections process should move forward. And in fact, they came here to discuss the Chief Weapons Inspector Hans Blix's, obviously at this point, last report to the Security Council that actually spelled out some of the key remaining disarmament tasks that the Iraqis could become engaged in, and also it detailed a work program for the inspectors. The U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte coming out and in his own words, Aaron, essentially saying that it was ridiculous that as inspectors were leaving the country and that the UN was pulling back on this and that war was imminent, that we would even be convening to start discussing a work schedule for the inspectors. So a lot of angry words there in the Security Council, which is something that we have seen quite a bit in the last 2 months or so, Aaron.
And someday when the history of this is written, Michael, will have a better feel for the damage done, the scars left behind at the Security Council. Christian Amanpour in Kuwait. Christian?
Aaron, we've been talking a little bit about what the soldiers know about what's been going on. We're going now to Walt Rogers, who is, you know, this term embedded with an army division in northern Kuwait there. Walter, what are the soldiers there learning now?
Christian, what you're looking at now is soldiers of the U.S. 7th Cavalry borrowing my shortwave radio, listening to the latest shortwave news on the attack on Baghdad earlier in the day. The soldiers you're looking at, many of them are tank commanders, non-commissioned officers, sergeants, who will be driving the tanks north when the order comes to come forward. And they were caught off guard this morning. That is to say, they did not know that that Baghdad was about to be the target of cruise missile attacks. I'd like to ask them now. Sergeant Wheatley, let me ask you first. Were you surprised when you heard that the cruise missile attacks fell last night?
Yes, sir. Very surprised.
Happy?
Alleviated, more or less. Glad for it to start, and glad for it the sooner it starts, the sooner it gets over.
Sergeant Wheatley, what's it mean for your unit?
We've prepped for it for a long time. Most of us here have been together for over a year, and we're ready to go do what needs to be done.
Sergeant Birdsong, same. Were you surprised when those cruise missiles slammed into Baghdad?
I was surprised, but at the same token, you know, not really surprised. We knew it was coming. I'm glad to see it started.
But you were sort of caught off guard. You were out there in your vehicles, weren't you?
When I woke up this morning, we heard the news. A little bit of surprise, you know, and trying to wonder what the target was. But overall, all our guys are like, yeah, you know, just finally got started. We're ready to go do what we got to do.
Are you surprised you're not moving forward yet?
No, not really. Due to the timeline the president's put out, we have all been brought up that the air war would start first, and I'm glad it started to start prepping for us to move.
Sergeant Knight, how about you? You ready to go?
Yes, sir, I am.
Disappointed that the bombs, the cruise missiles fell before you got your orders to move forward?
No, sir. They need to do their part first, and then we come and finish.
Senior ranking officer here is Lieutenant Fritz, is that right?
Well, our commander's here.
There's Captain Lyle. Come on, Captain. Were you surprised by the cruise missiles falling this morning?
A little bit. There's a target opportunity presented itself, so President acted.
Lieutenant Fritz, West Point class of 2002, as I recall, right?
Yes, sir.
Were you surprised when those cruise missiles started slamming in before you got the orders to go forward?
Absolutely.
Anxious to go now?
Ready to go.
The hesitation, what's the hesitation?
Hesitation.
In your voice, you say ready to go.
We're just ready to go. I mean, that's just
Captain Lyle, I'd like to ask you, what happens if your soldiers go forward and find Iraqis, civilians, being used as human shields?
We deal with the situation accordingly. We definitely do not want to harm any non-combatants in any way. We're there to liberate those same people, so we take every precaution and develop the situation as best we can to ensure their safety.
Thanks very much. We've been talking to Captain Clay Lyle and the soldiers of the 7th Cavalry, the Apache Troop. They are just catching up on the news this morning. They, like most of the world, was caught a little bit off guard by virtue of the fact that the president had ordered a limited strike, a cruise missile strike against areas in Baghdad. The soldiers you're looking at will lead the attack for the U.S. Army when the orders come to go forward. But at this present time, there is no operational order to continue, so we're staying in the attack position with the 7th Cavalry. Christiane, back to you.
Walter, now that the initial stages have begun, of course, everybody is trying to figure out a timeline. What have you gathered in your time with those soldiers there, with the 7th Cavalry Division, about a sort of timeline? For instance, when the major air assault begins, when is the ground assault scheduled?
Well, nothing that happened in terms of that cruise missile strike on Baghdad, and it was a limited strike earlier in the day. Nothing has changed the operational battle plan for this group, the 7th Cavalry. They have their orders. We can't say exactly when they're supposed to go forward, but I can tell, looking at the readiness of the unit around me, these soldiers, they could move very quickly. The problem is the order has not come from the Pentagon yet, and the plan is not going to be changed by that limited cruise missile strike. So we're looking at least 12, 24 hours, perhaps even longer. The Pentagon, the White House is not going to be rushed, and you can see that by the rather laid-back position we see in the field. These soldiers could move very, very quickly. The men you see behind me, most of them NCOs, could scramble on the top of their main battle tanks down in those turrets, 5 minutes or so, and be out of here, have those engines running. The problem for them, of course, is that the order has not come forward. Now, we did have some supply vehicles, 5,000-gallon and 2,500-gallon tankers come up to bring more fuel or have fuel at the ready for the tanks when the order comes to go forward. But the line of departure has not been crossed yet. That's still ahead of us back over there, over the Iraqi border. Back to you, Christiane.
Walter, thanks very much, and we go back to Aaron now at CNN headquarters.
Christiane, thank you. We were looking at Sergeant Wheatley. I didn't hear his first name, and maybe he didn't give it, but he was the first person Walt interviewed with the big mustache. Everyone who has ever been in the service knows Sergeant Wheatley, knows a non-com who looked like that young man, and you look at those people, they are about to do some very difficult work in the days ahead, and all of us think of them and worry about them and wish them nothing but safety tonight. Their commander-in-chief went on TV at 10:15 Eastern Time to announce what had become clear about a half an hour earlier, that Operation Iraqi Freedom was underway. Chris Burns is now taking the watch at the White House. Chris, it was 4 minutes. The president's statement was 4 minutes, not very long, but it certainly said a lot about what's to unfold.
Aaron, absolutely. And that decision that the president made was made shortly before that. The president had a second National Security Council meeting, actually a war planning meeting in the afternoon. This had begun to happen this week, just this week. This second meeting rolled on longer than expected, and what really pricked our ears up was actually watching the fact that Vice President Dick Cheney had spent an inordinate amount of time there at the meeting and had stayed there, an effort having been made since September 11th, 2001, that both President and Vice President should not be together a very long time to try to make sure that leadership would survive in the event of another terrorist attack. So that was a very important indication that a big decision was on its way. President Bush having made his decision, according to senior administration officials, at 6:30 this evening. At 7:30 that meeting broke up. The president then giving his speech at 10:15 this evening, saying that what was happening had only just begun.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Now, the target having been made, the president decided, because the CIA and other agencies had told him there was this opportunity to strike at a major leadership target. Now, the Pentagon sources are telling us that it was actually aimed at Saddam Hussein, but we can't confirm that from this end. What was important was that there was a major leadership target, try to cut the head off the military leadership, and perhaps that would make it easier to advance in the next few days. Aaron?
Chris, thank you. Chris Burns, I placed you at the White House. You are covering the White House. There comes a point, just so you know why Chris is not standing on the White House lawn, when the White House says we don't want any more live shots coming out of the area. In part, it's security, in part it's because the lights are annoying to those people inside, honestly, who are trying to sleep. That would be the President and the First Lady and any guests they might have. And so I gather that that this is what happened, that they moved us across the street, and we gladly oblige in that situation. The President is in the residence. The First Lady is there also. We haven't seen much of the First Lady over the last several days, but we are told that while she didn't have a public schedule, some friends had come to visit, and that this is obviously an important and difficult time for the First Family, and our thoughts are with them as well. Whatever feelings you have about the war and the appropriateness of it, the weight of these sorts of moments and the history of these sorts of moments on any president is important, and they are important moments, and our thoughts are with them as well. Among the things that we'll be doing over the course of this war, however long it goes, and we all hope it doesn't go very long, is trying to explain the battle plan as it unfolds. A lot of that duty will fall to Miles O'Brien and an assorted group and distinguished group of analysts, generals, retired and otherwise. Miles is with us for the first time now tonight. Miles, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Aaron. And I'm joined by Alec Fraser, who is retired as a captain of a cruiser in the Navy and has spent a lot of time, at least in training, firing off cruise missiles, and can tell us a little bit about what goes on a naval ship at this time. First of all, Alec, good to have you with us. We do know this now, as we point out on the map here, we had the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf were the points of origin for some 40 cruise missiles. And we're talking about a range of between 700 to 1,000 miles for a cruise missile, so that's well within their capabilities. Tell us what goes on a Navy ship when it comes time to fire off a cruise missile.
To fire a cruise missile requires you to have a target, and that target is downloaded from satellite pre-programmed targets. It's loaded into a mainframe computer on the ship, and then when the target is assigned by the theater commander, that target is downloaded into the missile and then it is fired. So it takes about 5, 10, 15 minutes to get the target loaded onto the missile, but the target is already available in the mainframe computer system on the ship.
Now, I'm told typically what happens is they don't fly like that arrow I've just put on there. They fly kind of a zigzag pattern typically as they come in. What's the purpose of that?
The beauty of a cruise missile is that you can have a lot of pre-fly points that you go to along the way, avoiding anybody being able to see the missile, being able to detect it and give an early warning. So you can fly the missile at various quadrants and at a target bring it in from various angles. So say someone's looking at a particular direction, it sees the missile coming in, but he doesn't see the one coming in behind him at the same time.
All right, let's take a look at a flight of a cruise missile, just give you a sense of what it might look like with a graphical depiction of it. This one would obviously be coming from the Persian Gulf as we depict it here. Comes off of a cruiser like that one, and on it goes. It comes off with a solid rocket motor and then shifts into basically a small jet engine flying at about 400, 500 miles an hour.
Flying above any other type of things it could run into, then it drops down low once it gets over land. It'll fly to various points along the way. This one's flying straight, but it's mapping as it goes along, taking some points and taking GPS coordinates at the same time.
Low infrared signature, low radar signature. In other words, can't be picked up easily by defenses along the way.
It has no emissions coming out from it, so therefore any type of electronic detection device doesn't work against it.
How accurate are they?
Which window would you like to fly it through?
Really?
Is that accurate?
When you're talking about 40 cruise missiles coming in, could they all come in simultaneously, perhaps?
They could, and 40 missiles would not be fired by one ship. It could be fired by several cruisers.
All right. You know what, Alec? Let's take a look at the air for just a moment. This is from the USS Lincoln, where Kira Phillips is. We've been watching, that appears to be an F-18, perhaps a Super Hornet, as they continue launching numerous sorties. Maybe we can listen in to Kira for a moment.
Thank you, Miles. Right now, you're looking at this is from the VFA 115 Squadron. This is the F-18 Super Hornet. As you know, there's been a lot of attention on the F-18 Super Hornet, the newest strike fighter to the fleet here on the USS Abraham Lincoln. As you can see, the flight deck crew giving the signals, getting ready to go. Here we go, the first F-18 Super Hornet. First F-18 Super Hornet, that was from the VFA 115 Eagles, has launched off the USS Abraham Lincoln now. The advantages of the Super Hornet, of course, the heat-seeking missiles you probably saw on the side of that aircraft. Also, the bunker busters that we told you about. The Super Hornets, of course, known for their speed and air superiority.
I'm sorry, Kira, we got to interrupt you. We got to go now to the Ministry of Information on Iraqi television. The Minister of Information, let's listen in for just a moment.
Against the tyrant of this era, the Zionist ally, in this day where the determinations will be manifest, and Iraq, under the leadership of the great leader Saddam Hussein, may God protect him. This will be a protection, a shield for this nation, for humanity, against those evils, those tyrants in America and Britain. Dear citizens, the President Saddam Hussein, may God protect him, will speak to you.
All right, that was Mohammed al-Sahad, who is the Minister of Information, speaking on Iraqi television. We have not seen Saddam Hussein. There was a promise. I'm sorry, go ahead. All right, we're going to stay with this speech now, is that right? All right, we're about to hear from Saddam Hussein. That's what I'm being told right now. And we will probably stay with this picture as we wait for Saddam Hussein to appear. This was promised some time ago. And why don't we send it back to Aaron for now? We'll continue our discussion of cruise missiles later. Aaron.
Thank you. Well, we look at the slide, and that's what it is. What we don't know, honestly, we know that they say Saddam Hussein is alive, and they say that we're going to hear from him, but the truth is that Iraqi information officials have been saying that for at least an hour now, a little longer than that. They say, well, it'll be another 10 minutes, it'll be another 10 minutes. We'll have something on this channel or that channel, but to this point they have not delivered. We know, and you know,
God, most merciful, most compassionate.
They've delivered now.
Those who are fought as they are treated unjustly were granted permission to fight, and God will give them victory.
Well, we have the beginning of the signal, but we lost it there. As you can see, that's Iraqi TV. You know, I suppose it is in some ways fitting that, here we go.
20th of March 2003, corresponding to 17th of the Muharram of 1422 Hijri. The criminal, Junior Bush, committed, he and his aides, his crime that he was threatening Iraq with, and humanity as well. His criminal act comes from and the act of those who helped him and his followers. This is added to the series of their shameful crimes against Iraq and the humanity. This is a start for other additional crimes. O Iraqis and those who care in our nation, sacrificing for you and for the values of our nation and the banners of fighting and for its religion and for the soul, the family, the son. And here I will not repeat what should be said. It is a duty on all people, good people, that repeat what has to be done to protect and defend this dear nation and the values and sacreds. But I will say to each, this is a must on all of us, but I say on any of us, on each of us in the family of Iraq, the believing, the honest family that is being treated unjustly by its enemies, on all of us, on each of us, we have to remember what was said and what was pledged. And these days will go as God wills. These days will add to your record, your bright record, O you male and female dignified people. This is your share of dignity and victory and everything that will raise the status before God and will let infidels down, the enemies of humanity and God. And that you will be victorious, O Iraqis. And with you are victorious will be with you are the people of the sons of your nation, and you are victorious with the will of God, and your enemies will be in humiliation and defeat, God willing. Go, you sword. I'm not. Draw your sword, and I'm not afraid. Draw your sword. The enemy is making a fuss, and the enemy will not be stopped except by let the reins be let go anyway, but hope is there. Let thunderstorms go until the guidance appears and injustice goes away. And let dawn be the way to confront all bad, and pull your trigger and keep the fire on. Draw your sword. No one will be victorious unless he is a man and a brave man. And prepare a banner and call for the way of God, that the wound will heal quickly. Dear friends, those who call for evil in the world, those who fight evil in the world, peace be upon you. You noticed how Bush, the careless, underestimated your values, that you declared against the war, and your honest call for peace. And he committed this shameful crime this day. We pledge in our name and in the name of the command and leadership and the name of the people, the fighting people and its heroic army, in its history and record of civilization. We pledge that we will confront the invaders and we will get them to, God willing, to the limit where they will lose their patience and they will lose any hope in accomplishing what they were driven to by the Zionist, the criminal Zionist, and those who have agendas. They will go to the lowest levels and they will be defeated, a defeat that we hope for them after they went far in injustice and evil. We love peace and we are working towards this. Peace. Iraq will be victorious, will win. And with Iraq, our nation and humanity will win. And evil will suffer from what makes it incapable of doing any evil or crime at a level similar to the American Zionist alliance against nations, and at the forefront is our dignified nation, Arab nation. God is great, God is great. At the beginning, at the forefront is our nation. God is great, God is great. And live long Iraq and Palestine. God is great, God is great. And our Arab nation, dignified nation, let that nation live. And the human brotherhood, let it live with those who love peace and security and the right of people in freedom according to justice and equality. God is great, and let the losers lose. Let Iraq live. Long live jihad and long live Palestine.
Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, in a speech to his countrymen, what must they think? Saddam Hussein in military garb tonight. Normally we see him in civilian clothes, but the last couple of times we've seen him, he has been in his military uniform. He referred to President Bush as Little Bush. I actually heard it as Junior Bush, but in any case, he wasn't paying the President of the United States a compliment, and described this as a crime against Iraq and a crime against humanity. It is the duty of all good people to protect our dear nation. He said, "I am not afraid." And then, and this is important, 3 different times as I heard it, he referred to Zionists, the American Zionist Alliance. He said, "Long live Palestine." It is certainly the Iraqi president's hope that the Arab world will see this in the context of the long and difficult dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That in Arab capitals, that Islamic citizens will rise up in some way, shape, or form, and that will protect or deflect some of what is about to come visited upon Iraq. And so we heard it at least 3 times, this notion that this is an American Zionist, read that, Israeli alliance. The question, I suppose, Nick Robertson, or one question, Nick, is whether in fact that was Saddam Hussein. He is a man we know with a number of lookalikes or doubles. Do we know with absolute certainty that we were listening to the Iraqi president?
It would certainly seem at this time that every intention was given to convey that this was the real President Saddam Hussein. He is known to have a number of doubles, and perhaps analyzing that carefully would be difficult because of the large glasses, the beret, and the fact that his collar was pulled up quite highly. It would take a very sophisticated set of analysis, I think, of pictures of him to make a determination. It sounded very much like him. The rhetoric was extremely strong. He looked much more serious than we have seen him look recently. He portrays himself on Iraqi television as looking very relaxed. Very interesting there, Aaron. Of course, the theme that all of this is driven by Zionism, is driven by the United States' aggression to gain control over the region. We hear that time and time again from Iraqi officials. Very interesting here to get a hint, the first hint perhaps, of how Iraq thinks it will deal with this war, saying that we will drive them to the limit, drive the invading forces to the limit where they lose their patience and they will lose their hope, and the day will come where they are driven down to their lowest level and give up. This is the first time we've heard an Iraqi official articulate how they plan to try and win. They plan to try and do it here by making sure that the United States loses its patience, that the troops lose their hope, that their morale is driven to its lowest level. This is something that we haven't heard before. Very interesting, a call to arms to draw your swords, to draw your guns, clearly calling on the Iraqi people at this very, very critical time for them to stand with the government, to stand behind the leadership. Of course, difficult to analyze as well exactly what people really are feeling in their hearts of hearts as they stand, as they know, on the brink of a very, very serious war at this time, Aaron.
It is, to use a colloquialism, it is the knock on the Americans, I suppose, that, and this is a product of Vietnam, that the country does not have the staying power in moments like this, that it does not have the will to take casualties, that it does not have the will to expend the lives, I almost said human resources, does not have the willingness to accept the casualties of war. That has been the knock on the country in the post-Vietnam era. We would just refer again to something that President Bush said when he talked. He made it very clear that this may go on a long time, but I think the term was no half measures here, no half victories here, that in the President's view, the President of the United States' view, the United States is in it to the end, and there, in our view, there could be little question that that is indeed the American feeling tonight, that they will do what it takes as quickly as possible, but they will do what it takes to do the job the President has enunciated over now many months. Wolf, this question of whether it was Saddam and the doubles, I don't mean to use the term paranoid in the classic psychiatric sense. We'll use it in the idiomatic sense. He is a man obsessed with security.
He certainly is a man obsessed with security. And let me make a couple points about what we've just seen unfold on Iraqi television before coming out here to Kuwait. Over the past several months, I've had several high-level briefings with U.S. and other intelligence sources, and they point out about the whole issue of Saddam Hussein having body doubles. Usually that's when he's out in public. They have someone who looks like him, dresses like him, can walk in a crowd and almost pretend to be him, but you never hear that other person speak. Saddam Hussein has a very distinctive voice in Arabic, and anyone who's an Arabic speaker could certainly make out if in fact that was or was not Saddam Hussein, given the very recognized voice that he has. In this particular case, he spoke. You saw him reading from his notes, so clearly anyone who knows Saddam Hussein's voice would be well aware of that this was in fact Saddam Hussein. The other point you have to notice, at the top of his speech, he referred to the date now in this part of the world, 20 March 2003. That indicates that this was not a previously recorded videotape. This was a tape recording that was done since the U.S. strike began. Those cruise missiles, F-117As, launched that attack on those selected targets in Baghdad. The Iraqi leader also was very, very precise in terms of going after the President of the United States. At one point he called him the criminal Junior Bush. The criminal Junior Bush, a very derogatory term as far as the Arab world is concerned, meaning that he's just a junior as far as his father was concerned, and there's this long-standing, of course, animosity, hatred between the Bush family, of course, and the Saddam Hussein family, if you will. So it was getting very personal there as well. Let's bring Christian Amanpour. As you assess this situation, Christian, you see Saddam Hussein emerging on Iraqi television literally only very briefly after the U.S. clearly sought to decapitate the Iraqi leadership. It reminded me of what happened earlier in the day when there were rumors that Tariq Aziz, the deputy prime minister of Iraq, had fled or had been killed, and he emerged on television right away. It underscores how sophisticated the Iraqi regime is.
Well, yeah, and Nick Robertson was talking about that as well. I mean, it underscores that they understand the capacity of the airwaves, and they need to show what they want to show quite quickly. But I think in terms of what he said about Americans losing patience and perhaps underestimating America's staying power, I think what many people in the world forget is that that equation changed in the United States after September 11th. That's the one major change, I think, in terms of the American people's willingness to take casualties and the politicians' willingness to commit forces. Because now, after so many Americans were killed on September 11th, and so many police and firefighters were killed doing their job, there is no question any longer that the soldiers who are paid to do the job of fighting and sometimes dying will have to do it as well. So I think it's no longer appropriate for people around the world to question whether the United States forces and the United States public will have weak stomachs for this kind of battle. Certainly we don't know what's going to happen in the long run, but for the moment I think that the public opinion in the United States shows that this is not in question and that the American people will support their troops as long as they get the job done. In terms of his constant repeating and referring to the American Zionist plan, this is one of the main reasons why there has been so essentially little support in the Arab world for a war in Iraq. The fact that the United States has allowed and not intervened in the Arab-Israeli crisis over the last couple of years, and that this is going on unabated, certainly does not provide the ideal context in this part of the world for an attack on Iraq. And certainly speaking to many Arab leaders over the last few weeks and months, many of them said that had there been an attempt to put out the flames between the Palestinians and the Israelis, many of the Arab leaders would have been much more forthright and overt about their support for the disarmament of Saddam Hussein. So I think that's something that he knows goes down well in this region. Aaron?
Christiane, thanks. I think many in the Arab world would in fact say that this President Bush, President George W. Bush, has been less even-handed. They would say that. We're not saying that. They would say that than was President Clinton in his dealing with the Israeli dispute, and that has certainly, as Christiane indicated, caused Arab leaders and people in Arab capitals and believers in the Palestinian cause great concern. Nick Robertson in Baghdad. What is...
Indeed, Aaron,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, Aaron, I think very much about what Christiane was saying there. This may be the miscalculation by President Saddam Hussein. It's often been suggested that he made a miscalculation in understanding United States intentions and world intentions when he invaded Kuwait back in 1990. This may be the flaw in his decision-making process at this time. Rather than going for further cooperation with the UN weapons inspectors, deciding to perhaps to go to war with the aim of undermining United States resolve, undermining public support for an action against Iraq by believing that that can be done through attrition of forces. Perhaps this may yet prove to be the major miscalculation of President Saddam Hussein. This seems to be, from his speech, however, and that is his first indication, perhaps, that this is his intention to approach the war from this point of view, not one that he could win outright militarily, but one that he can perhaps win by slowing forces and creating casualties on the way to Baghdad.
I think that's a great point, and just to underscore one other point, actually, that Wolf made earlier that ought not get lost in here, that Saddam, and we assume it was Saddam, at least we have no reason to believe it was not, dated the speech. He said on this 20th of March, and so if the American attempt was to get him, I think we can, and if that was him, okay, there's many qualifiers so we can handle in one sentence pretty clearly, that part failed. The other point I would make on that is it's hard to know if he actually believes in the American impatience, General Clark, if he actually believes that that's real still in this post-Vietnam, we're a long way from Vietnam, if he believes that, or whether or not that's just the kind of thing you say for public consumption. The audience here is complicated. It's an Iraqi audience, it's an international audience, it's an Arab audience. There are many different constituencies listening to this that he was speaking to. General Clark.
That's exactly right, Aaron. He is speaking. And he's speaking as much to the international audience, I believe, as to his own people on this. And so he's projecting what he hopes to be the case. He's trying to project his own moral superiority. I think it's very interesting that he felt like after this strike he had to come out and show himself, which, you know, on the one hand you say, okay, we missed. On the other hand, it is a sign of some degree of insecurity that, you know, he's aware enough that, and it feels vulnerable enough that, hey, it's a real possibility. They could have got me, so I'm going to show myself. So I think that
that in itself is a measure of some degree of success in the U.S. strategy at this point. I mean, on the larger field, we really don't have a good picture here, Aaron. As I was watching all of this tonight unfold, I recall sitting in Belgium during the Kosovo campaign, and in my headquarters, we always had CNN or another network on because we wanted to see what the public was learning, and we wanted to see the pictures of, in some cases,
Sure.
our own efforts. And it was always surprising when I'd get the battle damage readouts through the official channels how much there was that wasn't captured on the television.
Well,
it's only understandable, but the medium is so powerful that it dominates.
I think that's a great point. And the fact is, we have yet to see anything that says damage. We don't know what was hit and what wasn't hit. We haven't seen it yet. We may see it later today. We may not see it later today. There's a lot of things about this day that's unfolding we don't know. Does it gall you as a retired general when this notion that Americans and the American military does not have the staying power, does that gall you, or do you just kind of laugh it off as a piece of history that is purely irrelevant?
Well, it's really unfortunate if that in fact is what he believes, because I do believe this country has enormous staying power. And the quality of the American Armed Forces is absolutely superb. And not only the quality in the sense of technology, but the training, the character of the troops and the leadership. They've got staying power like probably no army in history has ever had. So if it's unfortunate if people believe that, and it leads them to miscalculate and seek war with the United States. I mean, the rational course for Saddam would have been to cooperate with the UN a long time ago.
Not to be glib about it, but here's a guy who was badly trounced a dozen years ago. I mean, it wasn't like this is not like this is his first experience in this matter. He's actually done this dance before with the United States, and he actually knows how this plays out. And to miscalculate, I asked this question of former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once. What must he be thinking to see these 300,000 troops on his border, to know that there are literally thousands of missiles and hundreds and hundreds of jet planes prepared to launch other missiles, drop other bombs? What possible military mind is making these decisions?
It's hard to understand from the outside, but on the other hand, when we watched Milosevic go through this, we had every reason to believe that he was being lied to by his generals. And certainly we know that Saddam Hussein is a man who doesn't like bad news. And so it's very possible that his generals are saying to him, A, we don't believe the United States has those forces, not all of them there. We looked, we didn't see them, so forth.
I promise I won't do this too often. Gary Stryker's one of our embeds. Hard to get these guys on the air. He's out at sea. Report to us what you can.
Well, Aaron, we're out on the USS Theodore Roosevelt in the Eastern Mediterranean. And you may hear above me, we're in a room just below the flight deck. Tomcats and Hornets are taking off, but this is business as usual on this aircraft this time of day. They're practicing launches and recoveries, and there's no indication that any of the fighter aircraft on this carrier are participating in any action that may be taking place over Iraq right now. The Pentagon, as you've indicated, released some video from the Donald Cook, a destroyer which actually is in the Red Sea, but came from one of the battle groups here in the Mediterranean last week. They slipped through the Suez Canal to get to the Red Sea, where they would be in a position to launch cruise missiles, Tomahawks, from there. There was some question about whether they could maintain their position in the Eastern Mediterranean as effectively as they could in the Red Sea. So they slipped through the Suez Canal last week with some degree of secrecy. It was a very tedious process of getting through the canal because of obvious security concerns, possible terrorist attacks when they're exposed to danger. But at this point now, Aaron, there's nothing happening on the Roosevelt, or as we understand on the Truman, in the Eastern Mediterranean that bears on this conflict right now over Iraq.
Gary, but they are aware, are they not, what has already happened today, or last night, our
Oh, yes,
time?
they are.
Okay. And how did they find out, do you know?
The men on the ship?
Yeah, and women.
The men on the ship are watching CNN. The men on the ship are watching television. They've got they're plugged into the internet as well. But they have televisions throughout this vessel, and most of them are to CNN on a 24-hour basis at this
Well,
point.
I threw you a hanging curve, and I appreciate very much your hitting it out of the park, Gary. Thank you. Gary Stryker out at sea. Nick Robertson in Baghdad. Nick, it is still playing out there. The siren's still going off. Is that right?
Indeed, this seems to be the all-clear siren going off again, Aaron. No sounds of anti-aircraft gunfire at this time. It does appear to be the all-clear at this moment.
Okay. Hang on, Nick. Let me go back to General Clark for a second, if I can. General, what is Tommy Franks doing, General Franks doing? What are the planners doing right now? They have started something. What would you guess they are doing now?
Well, it's daylight, so first of all, they're all awake and working on this issue. And secondly, they may be trying to continue to adjust the timetable. There may be other targets of opportunity that they're after. They may have decided, since they've sprung it now they've got to have extra patrols airborne to take advantage of what's happening next, or they may simply have told people, move it up. They're also going to be concerned about how to synchronize the air and the ground. It's possible the ground forces could sit there for a while, but normally, doctrinally, in an attack position, you'd like to pause there for as little time as possible. And so there's probably phone calls going through back and forth trying to figure out, okay, now they know we're coming, and so how much tactical surprise is left, and how do we play one side off against the other, and what does this unit do and that unit do now, and if not now, then when? So I think there's a lot of high-level conversations going on right now, and I think the troops down at the bottom are cleaning their weapons and looking at their maps again and making routine pre-battle checks.
Do you have any sense that those troops, those particularly, we've had this concern over the last couple of days. The United States government has had this concern over the last couple of days that Saddam might launch a preemptive attack. Now that there has been these cruise missiles dropped on him, is it your view that the American forces, the British forces, are in any greater danger now than they were at 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight? Well,
I think that's got to be a consideration, and surely we're doing everything we can to prevent his ability to execute an attack like that. But in fact, we did move, and even though this is a big, wide open desert, he does not have spy satellites. He cannot see us, and he's having a hard time locating us. And Kuwait looks small on a map, but when you consider how the forces are laid out there, you can fire at a lot of empty desert and not hit anything. So I think we're safer for having moved.
Just hang on a second, just to keep viewers abreast of sort of where in the world everything is at this moment. The Iraqi information minister is talking to reporters. We'll get a translation of that as we go. That's going on. Now we can translate it, so we shall.
Country and our people in defiance of international law and the international community against the United Nations. And as I said before, we can't understand how to deal with these people. They are war criminals, they are mercenaries. The international law that applies to armed struggle does not apply to them. This is naked aggression and piracy, and this is what pirates and mercenaries do. This is what war criminals do. Therefore, international law does not apply to them. They are criminals. This naked aggression will be met by Iraqi resistance, and the people of Iraq will defeat this aggression. I ask you to show the world the crimes of the Americans and the Zionists and the British. We will take you everywhere so you can show the world. Feel free to show them these crimes. Now I introduce to you the Minister of Culture, Hamid Yusuf Hamadi. Today, the American administration has declared its bankruptcy. Today, that bankruptcy has become official before the entire world. And I'm not talking about the media side. My colleague here has told you, but I would like to tell the world that the pretext that was used by the American administration that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, then that was changed to what's so-called regime change. I would like you to go back to the 9th of December 1988. 9th of September 1988. On that day, Senator
the information and culture ministers of Iraq talking to reporters. I'm not sure what the question was that launched that rhetorical attack, or even if there was one, but that is part of the moment and part of what goes on in these moments in an attempt to play to these multiple constituencies that General Clark was talking about a little bit ago. I was a lowly seaman in the Coast Guard. I've interrupted a general twice tonight. I will pay for that at some point. Christiane?
Well, Aaron, clearly a concerted effort by the top leadership in Baghdad to come out fighting, if you like, at least rhetorically and at least with their presence. If indeed that this cruise missile attack, apparently we're told 40 cruise missiles launched a so-called leadership target, well then the Iraqis are doing their utmost to show us that the top leadership is intact. Saddam Hussein giving that speech, and there you had the Minister of Information and the President of the Iraqi National Assembly talking and carrying on the rhetorical barrage against President Bush, against the US-led action in Iraq right now. Going back to Saddam Hussein's speech, looking at the transcript, at least some of it, he basically, as Wolf pointed out earlier, very cleverly alluded to the date, today, 20th of March, 2003 in this part of the world, and he said, "Draw your sword, I'm not afraid." He went on to denounce President Bush and said that they would have no chance of winning. What we know is that from this end, anyway,